Welcome to the local campaign, and thank you for joining us. Our debate today is for the riding of Ottawa Centre for the federal election on October the 19th. I'm going to introduce the candidates in just a moment, but first let me go over the rules for the debate today very quickly. We're going to allow each candidate an opening statement of 1 minute in length. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random just a few minutes ago. Then we'll move into a series of debates about the important topics in Ottawa Centre, throughout the National Capital Region, and across Canada. In each case, I will direct a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have 60 seconds to respond to the question. Then we'll open it up to all the candidates for several minutes of debate on that particular topic. I will jump in if too many people are talking at the same time, but for the most part, it'll be up to the candidates to jump in and respond to the question and challenge each other and comment on each other's opinions on that topic. At the end of the debate on that topic, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was addressed, and he or she will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that topic. We'll move through a number of different topics that way, and then we'll have closing statements of 1 minute in length, and we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's introduce the candidates who are running in Ottawa Centre. First is the Green Party candidate, Tom Milroy. Dean Harris is the Libertarian candidate. The Liberal candidate is Catherine McKenna. Paul Dewar is the NDP candidate. Stuart Ryan is representing the Communist Party. And Damian Konstantinakos is the Conservative candidate. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for participating in the debate. Let's start with your opening statements, and we'll begin with Tom Milroy. Go ahead.
Thank you. The Green Party of Canada, founded in 1983, is now a major force in Canadian politics. We are a parliamentary party with 2 current members. Nearly 1 million Canadians voted Green in the 2008 federal election. More than 1 in 10 Canadians are now saying they plan to vote Green. Green directions point to more jobs, more time with family, and a livable world, now and for our children and their children. We strive to support a society where the pressure to make a living does not crowd out having a life, where having more does not supplant being more. In our Green vision, Canadians enjoy a higher quality of life, experiencing health and wellness, education and meaningful work, prosperity and economic success supported by ecological health. In our vision of Canada, ability or disability, economic, racial, or cultural backgrounds do not preclude individuals from contributing to and benefiting from a prosperous Canada.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the Libertarian candidate, Dean Harris. You've got 1 minute as well.
Hello, I'm very excited to present the Libertarian alternative to the status quo to the residents of Ottawa Centre. I know that it's individuals working together to create and innovate who will grow our economy. That's why the Libertarian Party and I want to simplify our tax code and increase the personal tax exemption by 50% to reduce taxes for all Canadians, with additional exemptions for seniors, students, people with disability, and dependent children. It's time to simplify our tax code and reduce taxes for all Canadians, especially those earning the least. And I know that we shouldn't have to sacrifice our civil liberties for a false sense of security. It should not be acceptable in a free and open society for a politically motivated government to covertly collect private data of its citizens and make warrantless arrests. It's time to stand up for civil liberties and repeal Bill C-51, replace it with nothing, and demand that due process of law be respected in this country. I look forward to sharing the rest of our platform with you today.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Catherine McKenna, the Liberal Party candidate. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Catherine McKenna. I'm running because I think under 10 years of the Harper government, we're off track and we need a change. I'm a lawyer, a social justice lawyer. I teach at university. I started a charity that does work abroad, and I'm also a mother. And I've worked really hard outside of the system to make a difference, but now I've decided to step up and run. With my team, we have knocked on more than 80,000 doors here in Ottawa Centre, and I've heard from you about a need for a stronger economy and more jobs, especially for young people, more support for families and seniors, more respect for our public service and our democracy, and a healthier and more livable Ottawa Centre. And the Liberal Party has the team, and we have the vision to actually make this happen. I'm running because I believe better is possible.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the NDP candidate, Paul Dewar. Go ahead.
Thanks so much, Mark, and thank you for viewing tonight. I got involved in politics because I wanted to make a difference. And for the past 9 years, I've been honored to represent the constituents of Ottawa Centre. We've done a lot of work together, and that's what I like to do, is work with others to make a difference. Be it cleaning up the Ottawa River, providing more opportunities for people to cycle in our beautiful capital, or making sure that we have reforms to the NCC to make it more accountable. But there's a lot more work to be done. I look forward to working to have childcare available for the young families in Ottawa Centre, to make sure that we create good, solid jobs in our public service, but in our private sector as well. But to do that, we have to change the government of the present day. The Conservatives have been in for more than 9 years, and frankly, they've abused their power. We've seen corruption in the Senate. We've seen poor appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions. We need a change. We want to provide that change. I look forward to your support.
Okay, thank you. Stuart Ryan is the Communist Party candidate. He's up next. Go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you all for tuning in and finding out about the democratic process here in Ottawa Centre. I work for QP local at Carleton University, and I'm a member of Unifor, the Union for Everyone, it's called, and active in the labor movement, international solidarity, and anti-war movements. Well, this is, it's a cliche to say this is an important election. This time it really is. We've seen the damage done by the Harper government in Ottawa Centre. Labor rights have been eliminated by such bills against Canada Post, Air Canada, CP Rail, and even this transit workers at St. Lawrence River. Democratic rights have been under attack with Bill C-51 and Bill C-24, where it's targeting the Muslim community, and they're also looking at people who fight pipelines and Aboriginal leaders.
That's time. Thank you. Finally, the Conservative Party candidate, Damian Konstantinakos. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for viewing this evening. I am the proud Conservative candidate for Ottawa Centre, Damian Konstantinakos, and I'm running because I want to make sure we continue the strong, stable government that we've had over the past 10 years. Bucking with the doubters and showing the opposition wrong time and time again. We've grown 1.3 million jobs in Canada, tens of thousands in the Ottawa region. Because of that, we've been able to put in far more money, a lot more money into education, into transit, into infrastructure, into healthcare, into preserving our freedoms and securing our borders and keeping our country safe. And this is the kind of stuff we need to continue working on going forward with a re-elected Conservative government. I'm an engineer. I worked in Ottawa's tech sector for the past 18 years, so I know the importance of maintaining a diverse job economy in this riding. We need private and public sector workers, and we need to make sure we have a government that's going to ensure that's going to happen and stay out of the way. Thank you, and I look forward to your support.
Okay, thank you to all the candidates for your opening statements. So we'll get into the debate now, and I'm going to start with a question to the Green Party candidate, Tom Milroy. Let's talk about something that I think is important to a lot of people in Ottawa Centre, and that's affordable housing. What can be done about it? What role can the federal government play in that area?
Thank you, Mark. Actually, it's a very good question, and it's one that's extremely timely for the Greens as we met with the CHRA yesterday to discuss the problem. Housing in Ottawa, affordable housing in Ottawa, is a real concern, a real problem. There are almost 11,000 folks in Ottawa waiting on a wait list for affordable social housing. The problem is acute, and with our federal government withdrawing funds on a declining basis to the point where it'll be zero by the year 2039. It's leaving our city in a real bit of a mess. Greens will work collaboratively with the cities and with municipalities to correct this. But it's urgent. It's urgent in that buildings are going unmaintained and properties are sliding into disrepair very quickly. It's a serious problem.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on affordable housing.
Well, Mark, I think one of the things that's missing is a national housing strategy. We're one of the only G7 countries, in fact, the only G7 country without one. We've been very clear on this. We have to have a national housing strategy. In other words, legislation that commits the federal government to actually play a role. Look, here in Ottawa, it's been stubborn in terms of the waiting list because there has not been enough investment. We have over, as was mentioned, 11,000 people on the waiting list. We had about 6,000 people who actually had to stay in shelters in 2014. That's a spike, and people are staying longer in the shelters. So we need to get moving on this. So the NDP has a very clear plan, $500 million initially to give a good shot in the arm to build 10,000 units across the country. That would be almost a third of what the City of Ottawa has asked for, of the 1,000 units that are needed. And then we'd make sure, on top of what the investments are with the present government, is that we'd have a $2 billion over 4 years to maintain the housing stock we have. The co-ops and the not-for-profits whose right now their mortgages are about ending, they need to have some assurance that they can maintain the housing stock they have. So a critical issue. Sadly, we haven't seen leadership on this, and we need to see it needs to be stable. You know, you can't just have a pot of money, say it's there for everything, and then say that's your housing strategy. Ours has been really welcomed by those in the housing sector. Just met with them this morning, and they welcome that stability we're talking about, a real plan and something that can take us into the future.
Well, the second biggest country in the world is going to struggle to have a national centralized program for anything, and certainly with the partisanship that exists on the Hill today. The best actors to enact plans to execute on these things are at the municipal and provincial level, which is why we're maintaining transfers at the level they are. Now, the promises you're going to hear and you have heard in terms of the money and through this national program that's going to be available, really, you just can't take their word for it. The money's not going to be there. Our plans ensure that bringing the books into balance, there's money for infrastructure, there's money for transfers to the provinces. We spent over $600 million through the provinces over the past few years with a housing first strategy, knowing that the people on the ground are best equipped to execute on this. That's the strategy we're going to continue with because it makes sense. Going into deficit, going to debt, putting people out of work, which is really what the opposition's plans mean for us, it's not going to improve the housing situation at all. It's going to put people out of their homes. It's going to make it much harder for families to find a home, to provide for themselves, and that's really why we need to stick with the strategy we have.
So sticking with the strategy we had will just exacerbate our crisis. It's amazing to hear this from my Conservative colleague, because when I sat down with different community groups that are involved in housing, they've said that there is a crisis going on now and that the Conservative Party has not renewed the investments. We are the one party who actually has a plan. We've committed $20 billion over 10 years for social infrastructure. A huge part of that is going to be investments in affordable housing. So not only is that renewing the investments, the critical investments in social housing that the community groups are looking for in Ottawa Centre. That's new investments, because right now, when I knock on doors, it's devastating to see that people are living in buildings that are falling down. That also means looking at where we can find new affordable housing. So creating incentives for the private sector to make sure that they have affordable units when they develop. Also looking at federal lands and federal buildings that are unoccupied, underoccupied, that we could convert to affordable housing. We have a real plan, and the reason we can do it is because, unlike the NDP and the Conservative Party, we have decided that our priority is on investing in Canadians, not on making sure that we balance a budget immediately.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because we actually are investing $500 million to get 10,000 units. The problem with the Liberal plan, I've heard this many times from Catherine and others, is that they have $20 billion. You'd think that's great, except it's not all for housing. It's for a whole bunch of other things, and it's not sustainable, because what happens when that runs out? And so we have a plan that actually puts the money in place going forward, build those units, going forward $2 billion to help with the upkeep. When I met with the housing groups that you met with just recently, they were very happy with our plan because they saw that it was sustainable. I haven't seen the Liberal plan to say exactly how many units out of the $20 billion are going to be built. The $20 billion from the Liberal Party is for many different things, and I think it's important to have truth in advertising. So I guess my question is, out of the $20 billion, how much exactly is for housing? How many units are going to be built here in Ottawa?
So one of the
so I'm happy. Would you like me to respond to this? So I can pull that. This is the NDP budget. We have a message from Tom.
Actually, I was asking about the Liberal plan. How many are going to be built?
Well, our plan is we're going to work with the different groups.
But you don't have an answer for that.
$20 billion over 10 years is a lot more than you guys are able to offer.
No, but how much for housing, Catherine?
Your party is focused.
You don't have anything for housing then.
You know what? I'm going to go through your plan right here.
How many units for Liberals? I'm asking about the Liberal plan. I've told you what
plan, which is one page, which says, I assume that this is where help where it's needed most. Is that where affordable housing is? That's not really a budget. It's one page.
No, it's $500 million. I just told you. How many units for Ottawa? have we will
detailed.
have 387 units in Ottawa
But how are
in
you
1
going
year.
to pay for this? We've
I just
committed
told
the
you.
money. We've actually put the money aside.
We've had
500
this
million
argument
in
a number
housing.
of
So
times, and I
we've
think one of
heard
the
nothing.
points that doesn't get spoken of, and it's interesting we haven't brought it up to this point. I did speak to one of the local co-ops, and an interesting point is the level of property tax in this city. And what's very disturbing, and I didn't know this until I spoke with them, is that these individuals, they can't sell their property in some of the federally sanctioned co-ops. There's
Well, they're
one just off of
co-ops.
Kirkwood. Right, but this is what's interesting about
That's
it
the
is
whole nature of these
they're
agreements. Do you
charged.
understand
Yeah, but
that?
hold on, Paul. They're charged
Yeah.
a level of property tax as if they were allowed to sell it. The house is valued as an asset.
Yeah.
So I think one important step we need to push on is that the municipality is, why are they paying so much in property tax for property they don't own, like you and I own?
But what
we
about
can
their
sell
Okay,
it.
well, just a second.
Okay,
This
so
is
Stuart Ryan, go
you're
ahead.
talking about market value. That was
Apples
put
and
in by
pomegranates.
the
Yeah, but it's a problem, isn't it?
Harris
Why are they
government a
forced to
long
pay so
time ago.
much?
I live in CCOC housing. It's very good. I know that the tenant vacancy rate is so low here that people can't find housing. So we would put 200,000 homes. It's social housing. We'd bring back this Canada Housing and Mortgage Authority, which both the Liberals and Conservatives abandoned, and that would help create more industry in terms of housing will need furniture, will need appliances, construction. They'll build the industrial base that's been lost by corporate free trade deals like NAFTA.
So I'd just like to clarify that out of our $20 billion, we've committed to renew the agreements, and we've also committed to increasing them. And the reason we can do this is we've made a different choice. The NDP keeps on talking about investments. All of them are backloaded, so they're not going to happen in about 5, 10, 20 years.
They're immediate.
When it's
10,000 in first year.
significant
How many for Ottawa
investments
next
do
year with the
not-
Liberal Party?
We are
Okay.
going to get all.
Well, nothing.
That's time.
Haven't
We'll
heard
have to
anything.
Stop there. We'll go back to Tom. Tom Milroy, the Green Party candidate. I asked you the question, so you get the final 30
Right,
seconds.
thanks, Mark. You know, public housing, public transportation, economic development, these are all issues that the City of Ottawa is screaming for help with. They require leadership from a federal government to coordinate, to collaborate on, to consult with. And, you know, over the past 10 years, we've seen very little of that. You know, maybe they're cutting checks and they're standing back, and those checks are getting smaller all the time. So, you know, I mean, it needs to be problem solving and at least some cooperation on collaborating with the city.
Let's stop there. Next topic, well, I'll direct the question to Dean Harris, the Libertarian candidate. The Victims of Communism Memorial in downtown Ottawa. What would you do about that if you were elected the Member of Parliament?
Well, what the Libertarian platform is, we would like to bring government closer to the people. That means empowering local communities to fund and manage local infrastructure projects to best respond to their local constituencies. Obviously, there's a special case here in Ottawa, being the nation's capital. And if we have projects that are deemed worthy of consideration by the National Capital Commission, it's absolutely important that local communities have representation on those issues. It's important that local city councils and mayor's offices have a seat at the table at the National Capital Commission, and that there are public consultations held on every project of any major scope happening with the National Capital Commission in Ottawa.
Okay, it's open to everyone on this, and since Dean Harris brought this up, if you want to touch on the NCC and on the request by the mayors of Gatineau and Ottawa to be part of it as part of this discussion, you can chime in on that as well.
Sure. Well, I mean, I would say that, I mean, our party's position, and actually my personal position, because the Memorial to Victims of Communism is in Ottawa Centre, is that the memorial should be moved. We know that land was set aside in the plan for the parliamentary and judicial precinct for a new federal court building. But beyond this is about consultation. This is about how the NCC does business. So it's not just about moving a memorial. It's about changing the NCC so it's more democratic, it's more accountable, it's more transparent. And I've announced a number of personal measures that I will be pushing for in that regard. So that would mean that, public meetings are open and transparent. You get the agenda ahead of time. That appointments to the National Capital Commission are not just people who are going to rubber stamp a plan, which is what it seems to have happened when it came to the change in location for the memorial. But there's an independent, transparent process where we pick people based on merit, not based on their party allegiance. Also said that we need more diversity on the board. So we should have a board that represents the diversity of Canada. That means more women. I would like 50% women, but beyond that, broader diversity. And I think the last thing that we need to do is look at representation of the cities, about Gatineau and Ottawa, on the board of the NCC, because it's critical that we hear their voices. How that is done, whether they're voting members or not, I think we need to look at. But what's important is that decisions that are made here that aren't just about decisions for Canada, but have real impact for the residents of Ottawa Centre, that we make sure that we have a voice there.
One of the problems with this project, Mark, was that from the beginning it was something that had problem in terms of buy-in. And I say that because initially people were okay with the idea of a memorial, and it actually started with a different nomenclature, different name was to the victims of totalitarianism, and it changed. There was one group that split away. But then we had this interference from two ministers, and I found out through an access to information that Ministers Baird and Kenny wrote to the Minister of Public Works at the time, Ambrose, and said, we want it moved. There was no consultation. In fact, I even told this to the chair, Russ Mills, when I received the ATI. I said, you weren't even consulted. He wasn't even CC'd on the letter. And this is how the monument location got moved and became controversial. So we have a government here who not only didn't consult, but it was political interference. On the NCC, look, I actually worked with the government when I was first elected, and there were some good reforms. Some good things happened. We actually worked together on making sure the top job was split into two, to have a chair of the board and have someone who was CEO for operations, and to actually have open meetings. Before, with the previous Liberal government, there was closed-door meetings. There was no accountability. So we got some accountability. But I also proposed in the bill that I put forward is to actually have representation from both councils in both Gatineau and Ottawa. My proposal is a bit different from what the mayors want. I think it should be someone who's chosen by respective councils, so that we actually have the buy-in from the whole council. And I had in my proposition that they would have to report back to the respective councils on what was happening in the NCC, so we could have buy-in. So it's not just about a mayor attending the meeting. This would be about having membership of a representative from each of the councils and a reporting back mechanism, so we can avoid this kind of political interference and, frankly, this unfortunate event that we've seen with the victims of communism.
I think this became controversial when the other parties decided to make it political. And what I'm concerned about in a number of different ways
Who wrote the letter?
Quite simply, it's important to have this memorial in place for a number of reasons. One, we have a Liberal Party leader who actually expressed admiration for communist dictatorships, and that's something that means we do need to continue this message and remind people of it. My grandfather, when he was finished fighting the Nazis, had to fight the communists. For decades, Canadian forces, men and women, spend time overseas as a shield against communist expansion. This is a message we can't forget. We have a memorial to human rights.
So why make it controversial?
We do not need another building for justice. And the point is, maybe we should actually move it a lot closer to where Justin Trudeau's living, so he remembers what this is for.
Why don't you focus on the question?
Come on, Catherine. How can you express admiration of that?
Do you support
this is a small, respectful, memorial in a location where it would be appreciated, one that's not being used today, one where a new Court of Justice isn't required.
And a location that went against the parliamentary precinct plan, the NCC's own plan. It went against that.
Well, plans are obviously made to be changed, they're made to be consulted in.
Proper consultation, proper processes.
It was done by a couple of Conservative Party leaders trying to make a point to get more votes from constituencies like that, Baird and Kenny.
I think this is something that needs to be remembered and understood.
The position is where this monument should be. There should be a monument to the victims of capitalism, like the Aboriginal people, this First Nations people in this country, to the workers who are losing their jobs because they're allowed.
Sorry, Stuart. There's nothing like the Holodomor. There's nothing like the killing fields. There's nothing like the crimes of Shining Path.
The positioning of that memorial is a symptom of what's wrong with the National Capital Commission. It is being it is being heavy-handedly managed by Conservative members of Parliament and ministers. In my view, the NCC is basically running amok. And I get it when they say that they represent 35 million Canadians when they make decisions. I understand that. But we live here. And when we go to the door and we knock on the door, we're seeing a lot of people that are coming to the door saying, that is a bit of an abomination. You know what? We don't disagree with having a memorial, but we don't want it on that particular position, and neither does the city. And they've expressed that as well. So, you know, again, no consultation, closed-door meetings, you know,
I think
just ramming it down our
we'd
throats.
be having this exact same conversation because it is really just an attempt to take a shot at conservatives.
Well, the other piece, Damian, is that the amount of taxpayers' money that's going into this. Indeed. We're hearing millions of dollars are going into this now. That wasn't part of the plan. There was supposed to be more fundraising. But I want to touch on the Public Appointments Commission. I'm glad that Catherine's personally in favor of it. We just put forward, again, our proposition as a party to take away these kind of partisan appointments, not just for the NCC, Mark, but also for other agencies, Crown corporations. We ended up with Arthur Porter, appointed by this government as the head of CSEC to oversee CSIS. My God, what an abomination. Arthur Porter ended up in jail. He died. This is what the kind of, you know, old boys network's about. We need to have, and the NDP proposed, having merit-based appointments, not based on who you know in the PMO, but by the merit of your credentials. And that's what we want to see, not just for the NCC, but right across the board.
Okay, we'll have to stop there, but we'll go back to Dean Harris. I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this.
I can't say I'm convinced that we need a national monument to the victims of communism. Well, I certainly do acknowledge those victims. But if we're going to talk about what we're talking about, is communism is a political system that disregards the rights of individuals and holds superior huge bureaucracies that are unaccountable to its citizens. And then we're talking about the way that this is done with political decisions being made at the highest level with zero accountability to the people, the local residents, and the residents of the country. So let's start thinking about accountability of government to individuals.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Catherine McKenna, the Liberal candidate. As you mentioned in your opening statement, you're a lawyer, you've got international experience. So I'm interested to know, if you had been a member of Parliament in the last term, would you have voted for Bill C-51?
I am a social justice lawyer, and in terms of Bill C-51, I think we need to be really clear. Our party has serious concerns with Bill C-51. We always had serious concerns. When the bill came to committee, there were many, many changes that were put forward by the Liberal Party to address the overreaching and violations of civil liberties brought in by the Conservative government. Some of them passed, some of them didn't, and our leader said, you know what, this is something that we need to fix, but we believe that we need to find a proper balance between protecting our civil liberties and keeping Canadians and our democracy free and safe. And so we tried to find that balance. And I think what's unfortunate about this issue is it's become totally partisan. On the one side, you have Conservatives saying, we will do anything to keep you safe. And on the other side, you have the NDP saying, we don't need to do anything to keep people safe. We absolutely need to protect charter rights. And at the same time, we need to take measures that were brought forward by experts. We talked to experts, and they said that they were important measures.
So open everyone now.
You never answered the question. Would you have voted for it or not?
I would have said, you know what, you looked at everyone in our party, we voted for it because we thought it found the right balance.
Well, and we know what happened, but would you have voted for it?
I would have voted for it, and I would have pushed for changes, and that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I'm part of the group that is looking at how we need to amend this bill so that we get the right balance.
Yeah, but the bill is in no danger of not
And there are provisions that are necessary.
If you really felt that strongly, would you just not have voted against it?
Sorry, well, why would you guys bring in the bill when it had all those problems?
No, we stand behind the bill.
Why would you bring in a bill that brought in, that violated charter rights?
Yeah, but you talk about partisanship.
You didn't let us at committee actually have a proper discussion. You didn't let experts put forward their view. If they had, we probably could have had a discussion where Canadians, parliamentarians did their job, which is work together and find the right balance.
Then vote against it.
We said that it is important to find a balance, and we thought some of the measures were really important. So that's why we did it,
But
and
again,
we always
the bill is going
made
to
it
pass.
clear.
We have the majority, so why not make a statement and act that
but
manner.
you know what, Damian? Why didn't your party do what a normal party would do, which is actually have a proper discussion about how do we keep Canadians safe, but how do we also protect our civil liberties? And also, why did you not listen to experts who said we absolutely need parliamentary oversight? It is 100% clear
No, I looked at
that
judges
we
to
need to
resolve
have
these, so
parliamentary
they issue warrants
oversight.
far more than I trust MPs to do.
One of the
this.
challenges, Mark, that we had from the beginning, and I was our spokesperson the day that our Prime Minister announced C-51, not in Parliament Hill, but in Richmond Hill. And it was astonishing to watch because they so politicized this. The day before, this is a classic Conservative playbook, they decided to have a special meeting between the Committees of Defense and Foreign Affairs and the Vice Chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And they said this because they thought it was important to hear about what was going on in Iraq. Well, the Foreign Affairs Committee, we've been doing a study on Iraq. I'd asked the ministers to come before, but they told me, David Anderson, the Parliamentary Secretary, that we needed to hear from them both. They were going to give us an hour to hear from both of the ministers. Usually have 2 hours for a committee. I said, well, maybe a little more time might be good. Well, what ended up happening? We ended up having that playbook where we had the ministers provide their take on what was happening in Iraq. The next day, we have the Prime Minister in Richmond Hill announcing C-51, creating a lot of fear, not giving us the full details. And what I said at the beginning was, you know, it's not actually, with due respect to Catherine, about this balance. A free country is a safe country, and a safe country is a free country. It's about values, and so we stuck to those values. And with all due respect to the Liberal Party, you know, at some point you have to pick a lane. You have to decide if you're going to go with the Conservatives on this or not. And when they had the chance to stand up to Stephen Harper on C-51, they sat down and they voted with him. I have no idea why, if they thought they could amend it and that the government wasn't going to actually accept their amendments, at the end of the day, they should have said no. But they didn't. And the fact of the matter is, when it comes to something as important as civil liberties, you have to stand up. That's not politicizing. That's why we get involved in politics. It's about our values and standing up. This is the party of the charter. And I was very surprised
We are the
to
party
see.
of the charter.
I know, but then you turned around and you rejected the whole notion of protecting liberties. It was astonishing.
Paul,
It was very sad.
in our charter,
It was very sad to see the Liberal Party do that.
Charter, then, I will say that we
It's
have.
important to make sure that the police forces in this country have the tools available to them, that if a child is, or if a young person is going to travel overseas to conduct terrorism and CSIS finds out about it, that they're able to inform the parents. Simple measures that are taken, that
They could have done
exist
that,
in
and they
Germany
didn't before
and in
because there
England
was
today,
lack of resources.
and there
Damien.
certainly
That
brings
very
us into
case,
that
actually, you're
same
wrong.
level.
They didn't need C-51 to do that before.
When Bill
There was a
C-51
case
was
where
introduced,
someone did go
and the other
overseas
parties-
and they did not actually put, they did not have the resources to do that, and they didn't need C-51
While
to
the
do
Liberals
it.
and
They know that. You
NDPs
should know that.
tried to figure out what would be the most politically advantageous
Appeal it.
position on C-51,
Appeal it.
the Libertarian Party was the very first party to stand up unequivocally against C-51 in favor of civil liberties across the board. We don't need a bill like C-51. Canada is a nation that's founded on the principles of common law and due process of law. This bill clearly violates those principles. We need to stand up against C-51 and think about the threats that this Conservative government says they're trying to defend us against. What are they doing to bring those threats to our door? What are they doing to destabilize the Middle East with a US-style aggressive foreign policy that undermines the stability and peace in that region?
Dean, there was never peace in this region. We should not be foolish enough to think that our actions are what caused the instability. And first of all, there were attacks in this very riding, and attacks across this country, and there are threats.
Before or after the Conservative involved us in a foreign military conflict.
But that world doesn't exist.
Someone who no one had on their track goes and shoots up Parliament. We have to give up our whole civil liberties. And not only that, the bill attacks people who are conceived to be against the economic security of the thing. So that could be Aboriginal people, it could be people
explicitly.
Well, it wasn't in the first bill. It wasn't there to begin with.
C-51 is there,
it's
and
still
it is there
there.
to protect
That part is still there.
It does make me quite sad, though. I mean, it's hard to have. This is the kind of discussion in democracies. You have to have a serious discussion. And you know what? There are different charter rights. There's civil liberty rights, but there are also right to life, liberty, and security of the person. And there are people out there who do want to do us harm. And so somehow we have to figure out how do we get it right and not yelling and screaming. I just wish that we could sit down, listen to experts, and try to figure out it is not that easy.
And they all said that C-51 was the wrong way.
That isn't true, because actually I heard a lot of the experts, including ones that had concerns about C-51,
the majority of them
and
said
they
no.
said no. Actually,
back
a
to
lot
it.
of them said that there were important measures that were needed. So better sharing of information between agencies.
You can do that without C-51.
Well, I don't know. I'm listening to the experts, Paul. And then there are also no-fly lists. There are people who are getting caught who are innocent on no-fly lists. And
I know
we also
Mayor
need to
Harar,
bring...
and Mayor Harar was on a no-fly list, and look what happened. Like,
okay, well, I don't really want to politicize or take one individual case. My point is, when you do this...
This is
well,
what it's about. It's about how
it...
No, I don't.
How does this bill affect Canadians?
Yeah, how it affects Canadians is not politicizing it, Catherine, with all due respect. This is about when you take the state and you get pro-offer more rights to the state against its citizens is what's happening here. That's what the take is. So when I see that more rights or more powers, are being given to CSIS, and it's not just about the oversight, it's about what the mandate is. The mandate, we created CSIS, why? Because the RCMP was getting involved in things they shouldn't. And now we're giving the very powers to CSIS that the RCMP has. It's actually undermining the RCMP.
And
we've heard that from the RCMP. So the whole thing should...
We know our
do you believe that there are no measures that we need to take to keep Canadians safe?
Absolutely.
Well, what are they, Paul?
We put them forward.
What are they?
Well, can I answer the question?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to. So we have done three things. One is to give the resources to the people who actually have been disrupting and dismantling the cases we've had before us. The RCMP. The RCMP, Mark, has had resources taken away at the time when they need to be putting resources in the area to counter extremism. We put that forward. That's how we've been able to deal with the threats to date.
And why
we already have done that. We did. Actually, I did personally, Catherine. That was 4 years ago.
We tried to bring forward these amendments.
We did I did 4 years ago.
Okay, but Catherine McKenna, you get the last 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Look, I know that there are people who are very concerned about C-51, and I'm one of them. I'm a social justice, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I really just wish that we could have a civilized, proper discussion where we could talk about different rights, the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and our civil liberty rights. That is so important. It's critical to a democracy, and we're just trying to get the balance right. And so I hear on one hand, the Conservative Party is willing to do anything to make us scared, and so that's part of what this bill was. But on the other side, we've got the NDP, and they're they're thinking that, and there's no reason to be concerned.
All right, let's move on to the next topic. I'll direct this question to Paul Dewar, the NDP candidate. Let's talk about the niqab issue and how it's become a big part of this campaign, perhaps to the surprise of a lot of people. On one level, it's about citizenship ceremonies. On another level, it's about niqabs and whether or not they have a place in our society. And I think there is a thoughtful discussion to be had around that. Is there a way to find some common ground on this issue, which seems to be dividing Canadians right now?
Thanks, Mark, for the question. I thought Thomas Mulcair put it well when he actually recently gave a speech on this, because it is a big issue across the country, particularly in Quebec. And he basically said, look, let's look at what our values are. Our values are to respect each other, to provide each other with the semblance of acceptance for our various cultural practices. And that really what this is about wedge politics. And he also pointed out, for those who are concerned about this might be some way in which women are being exploited or their rights are being denied, if you really believe that, wouldn't it be better to accept and pro-offer people the opportunities of being a Canadian citizen where they have those rights? But on the other hand, those who say this is somehow not in keeping with Canadian values, Mark, most people should understand that to actually go through the citizenship test, etc., you are showing your face. This is about the final ceremony of taking oath. And so I think there's been a lot of misrepresentation.
Well, you said something interesting in the second part of your question. I want to make sure we do address that. I personally feel that we should not be regulating what people wear out in their daily life, etc. So, and I'm sure Dean will be happy to hear that. But for the ceremony itself, I mean, an oath means something. And otherwise, why do it? Why not phone it in? Why not simply write it down? Now, it's very reasonable. And most Canadians agree, and I personally think anybody who wants a private ceremony with a female judge should be completely entitled to it, no matter what the circumstances. However, in this one case, it's very reasonable to expect that when somebody swears an oath and pledges themselves to this country, it's an important tradition, and it's quite reasonable to ask them to remove the niqab. Now, the rest of it, however, I fundamentally believe that they should be able to wear them in the workplace, they should be able to wear them everywhere, wear them in their daily life. I think the wrong approach would be to basically pass any kind of law that says you can't wear these, wear niqab, or really regulate in any way. That from a personal level, that offends me.
It's
I think you're regulating people by saying they have to take it off.
We have nothing better to talk about in this country.
Yeah, I agree with you on
To be honest
that.
with you, I mean, listen.
I agree with you, David. I don't know why we're talking about
Well,
it.
because your Prime Minister put it in issue.
didn't
He
bring
said
it
it was
up.
one of the top issues we had
This
to
is a
address.
weapon of
Sorry,
mass
he's
distraction,
the
is what this is.
We get asked about it.
Okay,
we'll
sorry,
answer
one
it.
at a time. One at a time. Go ahead.
Focus is
no,
the economy.
Okay,
not
quiet
niqab.
everyone, please.
I just want to say one thing. We have an awful lot of things to do in this country. We have crumbling housing. We have no relationship with our First Nations. We have a pipeline threat, perhaps on our own backyard, coming through this neighborhood that we need to deal with. We need to deal with an awful lot of things. And, the identification has been made in a private one-on-one. That individual can certainly wear the niqab during the ceremony. I don't see anything wrong with that, and neither does our leader. But we must move on. We absolutely
I
have
agree
to
with you
move
there.
on.
I don't understand why, with tens of thousands of pieces of, court cases that federal government is typically involved in. I think the number on any year is 50,000. I don't know why we're talking. He gets asked about it, he answers. We don't choose what the media chooses to ask us about,
You know
believe
what,
me.
Damien? The Prime Minister made this an issue. The Prime Minister is actually making it
We
one
get
of the
asked
biggest
about
issues.
it, we
You know
answer.
what?
We
We
get brought
tried
up,
to
we
find out
answer.
how many women we were talking about.
Two. So why are we talking about it?
Well, yes, it is
you
two.
have
So just so
Stephen
everyone's
Harper
clear,
ask.
we're
So
not actually
Mark, I ask
talking a
you,
huge
why are we
number of
asking this
women.
question?
Well, I raised the question because it's become a big issue on the campaign
Damien,
trail.
I have
So-
not heard at the door. What I hear at the door is the economy.
I hear-
Well,
I
I
just hear
do,
from your Prime
so
Minister.
just to respond to that, and the
Indeed.
reason why I put it forward is
Yeah.
when I do phone-in shows, which I've been doing every day throughout this campaign,
hearing from
and I put out a series of topics for people, this is one that a lot of people phone in about.
Damien,
So
I am
tens
glad
of
to hear
thousands of
you.
doors I knock on,
I am
I
glad
don't
to hear
do
you
it.
say, Damien, that you don't think it's the place of government to regulate what we're wearing. Your choice of clothing is a peaceful action. Doesn't involve any victims when you choose to don one item of clothing or another. But what I do wonder is why you and members of your party do believe that it is the government's job to get involved in other peaceful activities of our lives that don't involve victims, that involve what we put in our body, who we associate with, who we love, and who we marry. So there's a very large inconsistency there. If
Perhaps you can go into more detail on that.
Okay,
We have
so
not
back
chosen to open any of the
to
issues.
this
on
Nero
there.
fiddling
We
while
will
Mark, I
not
think
be
that
opening
this is,
on
I mean,
that
it is
those
important to
topics.
get back to what you said. There are lots of people who don't agree, who may not like the idea of the niqab even generally, but as our leader, so I'm very proud of Justin Trudeau because he was the first out of the gates. Unlike Mulcair, who is wavering, he was
never
very
wavered.
clear.
Never
He did waver. He actually said clearly, you know what, you don't get to pick and choose rights. So you can't just decide, you like a religious right when it's something that concerns you, and like whether it's wearing a cross or something else, and then decide in other cases you don't like it. And I think that that's really important. And this issue is a distraction.
I think it was, and I'm not going to get into the competition who said what first. The question is about what are we saying and what are we doing. And we've said very clearly that this can't be something that we get tied up in, but we have been. And Damien, I'm really glad you're saying what you're saying, but it's completely the opposite of what your party's doing. It's dog whistle politics. You know that. You know how it works. And here's what the problem is, Mark. This reminds me. This reminds me of, well, libertarians are saying the same thing. This reminds me of what the debate we had many years ago about Sikhs and the turban. And this is, what did we do then? We said, let's look at what's really important here. The importance, I think, in this case is that we look at the person's values. Are they a person who deserves citizenship? Have they actually gone through the test and they met all the standards of being a Canadian citizen? And then let them be a Canadian citizen. To use this at a time when we're trying to deal with other issues is irresponsible, but it's the kind of politics, frankly, we've seen in the United States. And it's really sad to see that this is being taken over, as you said, and people are calling about it. People weren't waking up in the morning thinking about the niqab until recently. People were waking up thinking about jobs for their kids, about the environment. And that's what's so distasteful about this whole issue.
And this is a
the
social
government's
issue.
responsible. Look, why not just get rid of the oath then?
The government.
Wait, but so let's
Sorry?
just be 100% clear
why
that
not
they
do
are
it?
making the
Because
oath and they
that's
are
a different
they
thing.
are uncovering their face. So just so everyone is clear, these
Yeah,
two
very
people,
important.
everyone is willing to uncover their face. So it's not actually to do with the oath. And I
Exactly.
agree with Paul that this is just a wedge issue.
No,
It's a
totally.
number of issues. It's like, second-class citizens. It's all these issues. You're trying to make this election because you have not been able to grow the economy. You're trying to make this. You're trying to make this an election about fear.
Again. We did grow the economy 2 months straight, 0.3% reported yesterday, despite what you said. Steve fixed the economy. He doesn't need your multi-$10 billion deficit.
What I'm
First
glad
Nations
to hear
housing.
Damian say is that he
You know-
doesn't believe this is an important issue and we shouldn't be talking about it. And I encourage you, Damian, after the
that
show,
message up.
please talk to your leader and talk to
I'm pretty sure
everyone
the biggest
in your
conflict
war-
is between
in the
your
war
two
room
leaders
in,
right
in the
now.
Conservative
Because
Party.
it's
That'd be
between your
great.
two leaders.
I
and
know,
Quebec
we,
is this
Ryan,
issue.
I know we only have 18 seconds left on this thing. Everyone's saying not to talk about it. But anyway, it was the federal government who went to court to have that woman take off the niqab, and it's the government who's asking for a stay on that legal decision.
Okay. Paul Dewar, I asked you the question. You get the final 30 seconds.
You
on
know,
this.
Mark, I think this is indicative of the politics of division and fear we've seen. It's not just the niqab, it's the issue we were talking about just a minute ago, C-51. When we had leaders who were looking for consensus, and they were conservative, they were liberal, and there were leaders of my party who looked to solve problems that were real. I would like to see us, go forward in that basis again. What we're seeing now, though, is the politics of fear, of division, to get political gain. And what I've seen in this issue, it's been the Bloc and the Conservative Party taking advantage of it.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next question, which I'll direct to Stuart Ryan, the Communist candidate. I want to talk about the federal public service, which has raised some concerns about a number of different issues related to benefits, cutbacks, toxic workplace, as it's been described. So how can we continue to manage the federal public service in a way that makes it a good workplace and that, but does not cost Canadians too much money? How do we manage growth, reasonable growth for the public service, and make sure that that the government is a good employer?
Well, the last one. This government is not a good employer. It's already gone after sick leave. It's saying, okay, you have to go to short-term disability. If you don't agree with it, we'll legislate it in, which they did in the federal budget. The PSCC is just announcing now they're going after the pensions. They're saying, oh, well, since they got rid of defined contributions in the private sector, we can't have gold-plated pensions in there. So, and the cutbacks have come out of the last governments. People work there, call it the Hunger Games, what's going on. So that's what creates mental stress, and people who work in the government just have to follow whatever the Conservatives want. There's no longer giving truth in their advice. You got to give what the Conservatives want to hear. So we would change all that. We would respect the collective bargaining rights of the workers there.
Okay.
And that's my
It's
time.
open to everyone
Okay,
now.
I'll get
All right,
30
well, we
seconds
already
later.
know, and we've announced today that despite what the union boss has been telling people, there's no loss to the sick leave days that are banked or are happening. We're negotiating. There'll be a value to it. It'll be assigned. There'll be a retain it. The plan we're putting in place is going to address many of the young public servants, many of whom, 25% of whom have fewer than 8 days banked and don't have the appropriate amount of time of sick leave available to them to bridge to the short-term disability plan. There's many public servants in Ottawa today as there were when we took office. On top of that, tens of thousands of new private sector jobs created in that time. We've grown the economy, made it robust, and the best job security for a public servant is a private sector employee looking to get them, which is exactly what we're creating in this city, and that's what we're going to continue doing in this city. Now, with regards to the pension benefits, again, complete deceptions on the parts of union bosses who have a great deal at stake in this. Absolutely not. We're not going after the pensions. There's been no plan to do so, and we won't be doing so.
Well,
Now,
it's
have at it,
funny,
guys.
It's funny. David's saying this. He actually just contradicted himself because he was saying that this is what the young public servants need, and we're going to give it to them whether they like it or not. Talk about imposing things. The whole notion here is that you actually have collective bargaining. What does that mean? It means that both sides sit down at the table and you actually negotiate. What the government did is that they built in almost $1 billion in sick leave savings before the negotiations were complete, and they booked it into their budget, which was something to see. But what's really important is the relationship between the public service and the government. And we just put forward a very concrete package on this, 3 things that we said there, Mark. One is that it was in the Gomery Commission recommendations that there should be a code of conduct for ministers and their staff. I've looked at this, I've studied it. It works in the UK. In other words, instead of we have, you know, as they call it, the boys in short pants and the PMO telling bureaucrats what to do, they actually have to have a code of conduct so that they're actually going to be doing their work for the betterment of everyone. That's what they do in the UK. Gomery nailed this and was not picked up by this government. So stop the abuse by the political appointees in ministers' offices. Secondly, I already mentioned the Public Appointments Commission, put merit-based appointments in play, just like the public service has to follow the merit principle. And finally, we have to get a hold of the hiring and firing, this whiplash we see in the public service, and have more stability. 49% of the hires in 2013-14 were casual. We need to have more stability so young people can actually look for a career in the public service, be respected, and actually be able to have a career.
Well, I mean,
so this is an issue that I hear about at the doors all the time. I mean, it is really sad when you go to the doors and you hear, you know, people that work at Stats Can, people that work at Health Can, people who work at Environment Canada. They're all demoralized. And why? Because there is not a relationship of respect, mutual respect. And the public service plays a huge role. I worked in the public service. I ran a public policy organization. It is critical that we have a public service that is working hard to provide the services that Canadians need and providing expert advice. So the role of you know, loyally implementing this government's got right, but actually listening to public service and respecting what they say isn't there. And I mean, what we've talked about is reestablishing this relationship of respect and trust with the public service, frank and fearless advice, restoring the collective bargaining process the way, as Paul talked about, sick leave was done, baked into a budget is absolutely not the way to go. Evidence-based policy. Right now we have policy that's based on what the Conservative government wants, not based on evidence, and things like restoring the census. We absolutely need the census. Unmuzzling scientists. You know, Stats Canada should be independent. And also making sure that the public service has the resources to do their job. So what does that mean? You know, we've closed all these centers for veterans. We're going to reopen them. There are so many areas where cuts have been made so that essential services for Canadians cannot be delivered from public service who really want to do that.
We know what the public service is like under the Liberal Party. Demoralized public service is what you had in the 90s when tens of thousands of public servants were laid off. It is spend, 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 and when you're broke, everything goes. But that's exactly what happens under the Liberals. That's what would happen under the NDP.
And all
what negotiation would there be when you're firing 30,000 people?
You know what? There's still a negotiation involved in all aspects like that. And
when I speak to a lot of young public servants who are very intimidated.
I think it's insulting to organized labor when you say things like, well, we're going to show the union bosses, you know, what it's all about. And boy, we're going to really keep these guys in line. It's indicative of a 1919 kind of a discussion, us and them.
We have in this
where's the
country
respect?
Unions who have been nailed for providing hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal donations.
These organizations
unions
represent...
We're intimidating. Where unions are.
Actually, we're talking about respect for the public service.
It just shows a very good example.
Respect for the public service means making sure this money is there.
Your party has for the public service. It's unbelievable that you can stand there and say otherwise when you say, oh, well, you know, the union bosses didn't get away with this, or they didn't get away with that.
I respect the workers,
what about adopting
not the bosses.
Code of conduct that came out of Gomery that would actually say to ministers' staff and to the Prime Minister's office that you need to follow a code of conduct just like public service?
Well, I'll be happy to look at it. I've never read it.
It's been around for a long time.
I'll
send it to you.
The point is, the priority right now is making sure that we have the money to pay the bills and fund the public service. We can't afford to see that fall apart.
All right, Stuart Ryan, you get the last 30 seconds on this.
I'm glad I got this question. He said union bosses. Well, I can tell you one union boss at the Public Service Alliance lost their job because they gave up the severance in the 2010-11 bargaining. The ones are now, there's a new executive at CAPE because they're willing to fight for rights. Bill C-4 took away the rights of collective bargaining in the federal public sector.
Okay, we'll have to stop there, and we're going to move right to the closing statements now. And once again, we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute. So we'll start with Conservative Party candidate Damian Konstantinakos.
I didn't get a question. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching this evening, and thanks to my colleagues for joining again in a very good debate. This party has delivered over the past 9 years, and every election, what we promised, we've delivered it. Over 100 commitments made in 2011, over 100 provided for now. in the 4 years we've been in office. And through that, we have grown the economy, created many new jobs, and allowed billions upon billions of dollars available for seniors, for families, for infrastructure investment. We are a stable rock in a very stormy world, and we've had the right captain in charge as we've gone through a great deal of economic trouble caused by global markets, by commodity markets, etc. Now, internationally, we are the party that's committed to maintaining our reputation on the world stage for standing up for decency, for standing up for freedom, for standing up for democracy. And we're going to continue to do so, all the while ensuring that our families and our streets are kept safe. Thank you, and I hope you vote for me on October 19th. Have a good day.
All right, thank you. Next up is Communist Party candidate Stuart Ryan. You have 1 minute.
Thanks. The Communist Party of Canada presents the most comprehensive agenda that puts people before corporate greed. It's time for a fight for people's rights, both during and after the election. We demand full-time jobs, and not the precarious and part-time jobs the Conservatives are so proud of creating. We should pay for all this by doubling the corporate tax rates and introducing a progressive tax system based on ability to pay. By nationalizing the banks, resources, and energy industries, will have the revenue provide the basis for a strong economy that puts the needs of Canadians first. By voting Communist, you're saying that the people of Ottawa are ready to fight the corporate attacks on our rights. It shows that you're prepared to fight after the election, and I can assure you the Communist Party will be there with you. Our long-term goal is a socialist Canada, public ownership of the means of production with democratic control. On October 19th, please vote Communist. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is NDP candidate Paul Dewar.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for watching our debate tonight. I have been very privileged to represent the people of Ottawa Centre for the last 9 years, and I believe that we can do better. I believe with the new NDP government, we'll actually have the change that people want. We'll have childcare for those young families who right now find it very difficult. Ottawa is the third most expensive city for childcare, and we are hoping to make a difference to bring costs down for them. But also, we need to invest in our city, so we'll make sure that 1 cent of the gas tax goes to the City of Ottawa to be divided with other cities to the City of Ottawa to help with infrastructure and transit, and $1.5 billion a year to help with other infrastructure. But it's also about making sure that we have a secure public service. So instead of the kind of hiring and firing whiplash we've seen, we'll stabilize the relationship with the public service. We'll stop the program reviews that we've seen that have basically unsettled people's lives and cut public services to people right across the country.
Okay, thank you. Catherine McKenna, the Liberal Party candidate, you're next.
For everyone who's decided in Ottawa Centre that now we need a change in government from the divisive years of the Harper government, attacks on public service, attacks actually on everyone, you have a real choice. You can vote for a Liberal Party that believes in practical, ambitious change. And the reason we can do that is because we've made a different choice from the NDP and for the Harper government. We decided that now's the time to invest, and after 3 years, we will balance the budget. We will double infrastructure investment. The NDP won't. We will cut taxes for the middle class. The NDP won't. We won't give checks to millionaires. The NDP is still thinking that that's a good idea. We've said no to Harper's $44 billion fiasco. It's a bit unclear, but I think the NDP still believes that that's a good use of money. We believe that now is the time to invest in Canadians, to grow the economy, to provide jobs, to be able to build the infrastructure like affordable housing that's so needed in Ottawa Centre. If you want real change, vote for Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Dean Harris, Libertarian candidate, you're next.
Libertarian philosophy is based on the fundamental principles of freedom and self-ownership. The Libertarian Party is the only party that stands up for these fundamental rights across the board. The Liberals, the NDP, and the Green Party pay lip service to the idea that you have the right to show free expression, but at the end of the day, they ultimately believe it's their right to regulate and tax your peaceful interactions, your voluntary exchanges with other consenting parties. The Conservatives pay lip service to the ideas that you have the right to economic freedom and low taxes. All the while, they offer tax credits and tax cuts only to small boutique groups, all the while spending billions of your tax dollars in corporate subsidies to companies that represent the old way of doing business. Now, most of us do live as libertarians in our personal lives. We respect the self-ownership of others, and we don't use force to get people to act the way that we would like them to act. So I invite you to vote vote against the status quo of more government and less freedom. On October 19th, vote for the Libertarian Party.
Okay, thank you. Finally, Tom Milroy, the Green Party candidate, you've got a minute as well.
Thanks, Mark. Greens have pledged to work collaboratively in the House of Commons, to shift priorities, to promote innovative ideas whose time has come. We will start with a vision of the society we want. Does it advance the common good? Does it advance global security and peace? Does it address the needs of children? Does it ensure Canada's continued quality of life and economic health? Does it make families more secure? And does it protect, enhance, and restore the life support systems of our planet? Ottawa Centre is very fortunate to have such a great group of candidates for this particular election, and I'm proud to be up here with them. We may differ on things, as you've seen during this debate, but we are all dedicated Canadians with good CVs who wish to represent you in Parliament. And if you're thinking at all about voting Green, please do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in the debate, and thank you for watching this debate for Ottawa Centre. We'll see you next time on the local campaign.